Have GPU scalpers, especially for NVIDIA and AMD GPUs, finally quit? Look, GPU scalping was a massive problem during the last 2 or so years because of all of the GPU shortages and all of the issues. Now, things are certainly a little bit different. Let's talk about why they're moving away from GPU scalping and where and why it still exists. I mean, the last GPU to really be scalped heavily is the RTX 4090. Let's see a few reasons why. First, it's a really good GPU. I mean, I'm not an NVIDIA fanboy. Don't look at my wall, please. I do have AMD stuff. Haha, see? And if you like all GPUs, remember to subscribe, smash that like button. We're almost at 50,000 subscribers. I'd like to do it before the end of the year. And you see I like all GPUs. I even have an Intel Arc here somewhere. But anyway, I'll look for that later. Anyway, the 4090, I mean, it was an amazing GPU. It still is an amazing GPU, rather. People wanted to buy it, and thus GPU scalpers were there to provide that service. So let's break it down. The pricing. Yeah, the 4090 is really expensive at $1,599 starting price, but it seems like people were willing to pay well over $2,000. And of course, don't tell NVIDIA because they'll get an idea and try to charge more, which, as we'll see later, kind of failed with the RTX 4080. So the 4090, great GPU, had a lot of hype. It also has a pretty big variety of users that would want to use it. You're talking about high-end gamers. You're talking about content creators. You're talking about people that want to use it for machine learning, 3D work. Probably the only reason we didn't see it be even worse in terms of scalping was because crypto mining is pretty much non-existent right now. So you have that entire group of people who were willing to pay higher prices. Part of the reason why we're seeing higher prices now happen in the market, but the 4090 is sort of the remnant of that era where the 3090 itself was expensive, and then something happened to kind of justify the price. The 3090 was expensive at $1,499, and that got mixed in with the GPU shortage pricing. But then the 4090 released, which in many cases is over double or more the performance of the RTX 3090, and then it only went up $100. That's where part of the problem is. It's not expensive enough. I know that's a completely ludicrous idea, but it's actually the truth. If people compare the high-end 3090 and then see that the performance increase on the 4090 is actually really substantial and the price didn't go up that much, that makes complete sense, and it's going to make more sense to you guys when we compare it against the RTX 4080. Look at the 3080 at its mythical $699 price. Great GPU, right? But then scalpers made it $2,000 for a lot of 2021, and then NVIDIA releases the RTX 4080, which is now $1,199. So you're talking about 40 to 50% more than the 3080 for 40 to 50% more performance only, while the 4090 is more than 100% better than the 3090 in many cases. So you can see how the 4090 is definitely a unique GPU, explaining why it's been scalped so heavily as well. And of course, it's weird that NVIDIA actually seems to have shipped more 4090s than they did 4080s. To go and focus on the 4080, this is really where the GPU scalper market started to feel the most pain. I mean, you guys saw all the videos about 4080, scalpers not being able to return the GPUs, people not buying them, even, they had to reduce prices. Even now, you can pick up an MSRP or cheaper with the coupon code 4080 GPU from Best Buy or various places, eliminating the need for a scalper. There are less scalpers selling 4080s because there are many less buyers that want to buy them. The reviews outright didn't like the 4080. It's a good GPU, don't get me wrong. In fact, it's a great GPU, but at its price of $1,200, a lot of people weren't having it, and that price increase really created a lot of these problems. And then you compare it to the 4090, which is a completely different tier GPU, and then we have these issues popping up all of a sudden. As we move a little bit into the AMD GPUs, they had scalping attempts, but really were mostly unsuccessful because, first of all, they got a lukewarm response, and the 7900 XTX would be the one that would be the primary candidate candidate for being scalped. It has been sold out a lot faster. The XT still pretty easily available anywhere that you look. So for that reason, it kind of fares the same fate as the 4080, but the XTX isn't really like the 4090, even though it's been scalped more. It's just because it's been produced in more limited quantities, and the people that want to get their hands on early on will do so. So we did see some of that happening, but there's another huge issue at play here, and it all comes down from the actions of the GPU companies themselves and the pricing. I mean, it makes complete sense. If the 3080 was supposed to be $699, but you could never find it, people sold it for twice or three times its price for a lot of 2021. You see the tremendous incentive that people have there to be able to scalp that GPU. Something like the 4080, which is already $1,200, there's no space there. There's no incentive for these people to scalp them. There's no market that's going to pay, twice that price like they did for the 3080, simply because a lot of these GPU manufacturers saw what was happening on that market as soon as they released their GPUs. Do you think NVIDIA is happy that somebody buys their GPU for $700 and turns around and sells it for $1,800, 10 minutes later in the parking lot? Of course not. And eventually they're going to get wind of this, the AIB partners, and they all want to make money on the same thing that they're producing. So they're definitely going to mark these up a considerable amount. And that's exactly what happened. And then it's easy to obfuscate the situation and blame it on all sorts of shortages, blame it on inflation, whatever you want to do. You can certainly find cause for things going up. Sure, but the amount that these GPUs have gone up, even Gamers Nexus looked at the 4080 recently and saw just the price jump that it had absolutely blows away any type of reasonable expectation. If you're looking at reasonable cost where it should have gone up to, instead of $699, maybe like $800, $900 tops if you really want to push it, but $1,200 is just obscene and it's just a huge markup, and obviously they're taking advantage of that situation, not to mention that the AIB partners have even more space in there to jump up that price. Who knows what their relationship is with NVIDIA? Often not as good as we've learned from the EVGA situation. So when companies sell a GPU for $1,500, just because it has a slightly better cooler on it, which is not always the case since the Founders Edition is one of the best ones, then it's a little bit of a funny situation that gets created in the market, pretty much wipes out a lot of scalpers. Maybe it existed when the GPU first came out, but when people got smart to the situation, the manufacturer pricing is already so high and the demand from crypto miners aren't there. I really think those two things make the scalper market sort of really start to diminish to a tremendous amount. Before, we had the perfect storm. You had crypto mining demand where people invest in the GPUs, and that does make a difference. It was a lot of people, and the GPUs were cheaper from the manufacturer, like $700 3080. People would buy them all day, therefore creating that incentive around these GPUs. So what happens now? We're left with a market that has a lot of people complaining about the price of GPUs, rightfully so. Not only is it really expensive in the high end, having to buy, maybe a $1,600 4090, $1,200 4080, $1,000 XTX. These are all extremely expensive, and most of the time you can't really even find the model that you want. You have to get lucky, and it's still a little bit difficult to find them. Therefore, seeing how these prices continue to stay high. It's always hard to blame exactly what happens, but of course the demand is there from people, and then scalpers are there. And then you could argue that, let's say if there are 30 people lining up to buy a GPU on launch day and 20 of them have the incentive to be there early and they're scalpers, you could argue that's maybe perhaps unfair. That market gets completely taken over by scalpers. And let's say if the people that maybe have to go to work couldn't go there, showed up later, it does put them at a disadvantage when you do create such a huge incentive. But the good news is it looks like that incentive is going down because of those two main factors. Demand is going down because the manufacturer prices are so high, as well as there are less sectors of the market like crypto mining that are making pressure on the market, taking GPUs that maybe could go to other purposes. So we're going to have to see what happens this next year with GPUs. So far, it looks like people have rejected that 4080 price. Even the 7900 XT is not doing all that great. A lot of people have actually bought them simply because everything else is sold out, and it's really going to be the best next generation GPU they can find in stock. I mean, a lot of people would probably rather spend $100 more and get the XTX, which is reasonable to say, but when you look in the real world, if you're going into a store and going online, you don't have nearly the same chance of finding that XTX. So I can't blame people for getting an XT. That's even what happened to me on launch day of the 7900 XTX. Initially, on the first day, I wasn't actually able to get one. I had to get the XT because that was the only thing available. And then maybe a day or two later, eventually you can find one if you keep looking. But sometimes it's really what's left, and you can't really blame people for certain decisions. It's not exactly what they would buy if everything was available, but unfortunately, the market is still like that. And then, of course, one key factor here is if we don't have demand in the market, sometimes it can be inserted artificially. I mean, I saw for myself, as well as many of you guys, you can check. Look how many 4080s popped onto the market right after the launch of AMD's RDNA 3. In fact, close to Christmas time, every single place seemed to get a lot of 4080s. That means that NVIDIA distributors were holding them back until just the right time where people would not only buy them, but also take business away from AMD and things like that, which you could say maybe not the best consumer-friendly practice. If they had released these GPUs that maybe are sitting in warehouses for the last few months, you can trickle it out better, but on their end, it would create more of an issue because if there are a lot available, people would see them on the shelves and the prices would have to go down because nobody's buying them. But if there's a feeling of this artificial scarcity, you do get more people buying them as soon as they hit the market because then they feel like they may get sold out. And we've been a little bit trained the last 2 years to see GPUs sell out at high prices. So some people may expect that to still be the case, when in reality, it really isn't. A lot of that demand has dried up, and a lot of what we're seeing now is actually artificial demand at exactly opportune times, that they want to release them in order to create that same type of frenzy and keep those prices high and keep the inventory in a very controlled manner. And at the end of the day, that is very different than having a real demand from gamers and even crypto miners out in the market, because it's creating demand for something that doesn't have the same appeal. And when the tide comes in, as they say, you'll be able to reveal and see what's happening under there. And in a lot of cases, you can see by NVIDIA's own stock price, it actually tends to go down a tremendous amount when their sales numbers are really, really much lower than people expect. And then we have to see the transparency behind it and see what's going on. But at the end of the day, the GPU market still is kind of damaging PC gaming in general. And it's just very difficult to build exactly what you want. And the prices definitely are certainly out of control, leading many people to have to unfortunately buy whatever they can find. But the good news is, if it continues like this, I think probably over the next year, we'll see the scalping market probably really eradicate itself. And hopefully in the future, GPUs and computer prices in general come back to a more balanced level. That way more people can enjoy the hobby. All right, guys, let me know what you think down below. Do you think the GPU scalper problem is really diminishing? Remember to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.